Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Tech Talk. We are talking here about some techniques behind DeFiChain, MetaChain, what's happening from the core developer side. I'm very happy that Prasanna is joining again this show and giving us some insights what he and the team is working on. Before we start, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell button. Then you will not miss this show as a live stream. And with this, I would say welcome, Prasanna. Welcome back on stage here, Tech Talk. Nice that we can have a Tech Talk, yeah.
Thank you so much, DC. Yes, pleasure to be back. Yeah, it's always we're chasing after something big every time.
Every time,
So
yeah.
which is a good thing, I suppose. How are you been doing?
Yeah, really great. I'm looking forward. The last Tech Talk are some weeks and months ago, where we just have a rough idea about MetaChain. Now we are on a very concrete state. Yeah, the people are trying out the things on the testnet. Yeah, you are fixing and adding features. My feeling is we are moving towards the final launch. But I'm pretty sure you can give us some insights there. What happened, what is implemented, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this Tech Talk is a great place to kind of touch on that. And yes, before we start, I think community has been fantastic over the last couple of months. Ever since the launch of Changi, I think so many people have been testing out a lot of different things, including people stress testing it, maxing out everything. And then I think, some of our core developer nodes suddenly crashes. They're like, why did that happen? And then it looks like people have been, really testing everything. So which has been great. It's always great. And I think even particularly considering very early stages where things were breaking all the time, super appreciate that, everybody has been patient about it. Yeah, so perhaps, yeah, we can sort of start. I have a couple of slides. Maybe you can just walk through on a large insight on, okay, what's happened so far and what's happening.
Yeah, we will do it. Yeah, we have a great community. Thanks to everyone out there testing. I would say it's the best tested DeFi chain node software ever. Yeah? We have never done so much things on a testnet before. I just think it's needed, yeah, because of this very, 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 very big update. MetaChain is completely new land. Yeah, I think it's a very good version we can release for the mainnet because of all the effort put in advance. Yeah, and if the one or other is a little bit impatient, I would say it's needed. Yeah, because then the launch is better or more stable when we
Yeah,
did it another way.
yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the key here, right? So we're building something which is quite unique in many manner. So it's also, but fortunately, we also have certain spec that we have to meet. So it's sort of great that people can try existing tools and then see, hey, what breaks, what doesn't break with it. And so I think our approach has been, okay, let's really get out the minimum version of it really quickly out there, even if it breaks, even if you know that it's going to break. So that's kind of have been the journey so far. Provide the very earliest part available, and then team has been working really hard to refine it and get it to a place where it's actually production ready. And all that process is not completely done yet, but I think in the next 2 weeks we're pretty much everything is going to be in there, and everything that we want from mainnet we can add that. Okay, yeah, maybe we can start and then I'll
Yep.
sort of walk through. Yeah.
Then.
Okay. Cool. Here we are, 2023, week 31. Cool. So first, we'll just kind of talk about high overview of what DeFiChain actually, how it evolved early on before, and by before it's currently in mainnet, but testnet has by Changi testnet has evolved beyond this before now. So before it was UTXO based chain, which speaks Bitcoin protocol, but was its own network, and then on top of it you have the foundational blocks of DeFi, right? So which is the DEXs and the CDP mechanisms and governance and all of that. And that was before. And then now on Changi, along with that, we also speak EVM, and then it also speaks EVM protocol. So EVM is the machinery, so people can build our apps on top. but we also speak exactly the same protocol. So every tool out there can just connect with EVM, right? So this is sort of now. And just so zooming out back again, we kind of discussed this on, okay, what is this larger journey where we are heading? That native DeFi was that before part, and then integrating EVM is this in the middle part that we are actually in. And then the final stage of this current roadmap journey is cross-chain protocol. Now, what is that going to look like? It's sort of the same before, but then the other side will start talking to Bitcoin directly, right? So because we already speak the Bitcoin protocol, we already work with Bitcoin UDXO, so now we can actually, the same node can validate Bitcoin transactions as well. So we can talk to that side, and then on the other side, now we have all these pieces for EVM and ETH protocol, ETH protocol, and all of that. So then we can actually talk to Ethereum network itself. Right? So this is the larger roadmap for after the mainnet plan that we have, and then what will be the core team is already just planning out a little bit ahead, and what we're going to be working on through the rest of the year, right? And while talking about this, we do already talk to Bitcoin network, so part of that already kind of exists, where that's how atomic swap works. But this, well, we talked to it through another SPV layer, but this way, through the future version of it, we can actually talk to the complete node itself and the complete network itself. This pretty much becomes a part of a Bitcoin node itself. So that's going to be a pretty exciting journey going forward. Okay, so this just setting this larger context, and then now looking at what is all the major milestones that we've been working towards, and community was also involved throughout all of this. Just covering that, somewhere towards the end of April, we had FloppyNet. That was sort of this pre-alpha, where early on, just things are going in very, very early prototypes, and there was no guarantees of any kind, where the things will be rolled back as and when something new is rolled out or something old. But community actually started testing at that point. That was incredible. And that was the entire pieces of FloppyNet, where everybody was sort of reporting bugs all over the place. And then came Changi. So Changi was this first point where, okay, now we have this network where we're not going to keep rolling back, where if at all there are whatever bugs there are, we're going to continue to keep supporting that bug itself. So that was Changi. And then through that Changi, it was this one network until last week, where all the bug fixes, along with new features, everything was sort of rolling in. And then last week, we rolled back Changi to remove all these intermediate band-aids that were put in place to support every step of those Changi network. And then finally, we've rolled everything back. And there's also a lot of cleanups that's happening. And also along with very, very early version of DST20. We'll cover that a little bit more later. And that was launched last week on Changi. And there's still a little bit of rough edges where, there are a couple of places where the node performance is not as well, and then sometimes it crashes. So all of that are things, now it was after the removal of all these band-aids, there were still, we're not close to all the loops yet. So that's being done now this week. And then now, so end of August is where the orange dot is next week, where we're pretty confident that we can get everything into testnet 3, right? So we'll sort of zoom in, and then the green dot is by the end of August, we want to actually get to a place where we can start mainnet. Right? So, okay, let's zoom into that as well a little bit more. So week 31 is where we are. So the purple one on the bottom is sort of Changi network. Early next week, the plan is once we make sure that we get everything in this week, whatever we have in place, we should get it to a point where the network is very stable. And once we're there, get it on testnet 3. So testnet 3 is this stable version of mainnet, right? So it is something that we don't want to break. We want developers to have a sort of a mainnet replica. And now I think that we are ready. Once we've sort of resolved all of these existing ones, then we should be ready there. We start there. And then Changi has already been going through a lot of testing from a consensus point of view. So consensus is pretty much entirely covered. The only part that's really left is that DST20, which is launched now. And the plan here is also, I actually believe today we'll have another small release, which kind of makes the network stable. It's going to be another beta 8. And then this week, we probably might have another beta, even though we have just 2 days. So, because we just want to get all of these refinements out there as quickly as possible so the community can also test it. And then once it's done, early next week, testnet 3, and then the clock starts ticking for mainnet. So once things are rock solid on testnet 3, then we set the fork for it a little bit later, and towards the end of it. This is kind of the rough timeline that we're looking at. And then let's kind of, I think we've touched on many of the details, so we'll just kind of look at very high level. Okay, DeFi, that's the reference node implementation 4.0. What is it all going to have? One is the VM itself, it's the EVM support, and going hand in hand with that, the RPC, which is basically how all the Ethereum tools can talk to the EVM layer. And then wallet, the DeFi wallet now also supports ERC 5.5 addresses. So existing keys, any key that they already have will also just automatically, you should be able to represent it as ERC 5.5. And so Node should support everything related to Bitcoin, everything related to Ethereum. Not everything. Taproot is still there, but that we'll talk about at a later point. And then DSD Waltz. DUSD Waltz is the one where it removes the limitation for the DFI requirement, which was the defib that was passed. Support for that is there. Turning it on, turning it off. It's all dependent on the governance, right? And then, yes, and that was contributed. Most of it, almost all of it, was actually contributed by Kuki there. And then staking, right? So staking, BEC32 addresses are now supported for your reward address. That's also going to be in there. What this means is, light wallet address can now be set as your reward address, and you'll just automatically get your rewards into those addresses. That support is there. And then in terms of tokens, we've always had token splits on chain, by which, the DGOG and then DMSO and all of that sort of went through the same. But it did not have fractional split support. What fractional split means is now you can actually merge them together with this. So that support is also in there. And then governance neutral, which was something that was missing. It was just yes or no. And now that's also in there. So these are kind of from a large level, what is the version 4.0 node going to support. And then perhaps let's also, digging in a little bit more, what are the new RPCs that are sort of introduced, which is one is called VMMap. So what VMMap is going to do is, and there is a representation of, so everything in DeFiChain, it's all in the same block, right? So there are no different blocks. But for EVM tools to support, there's going to be a representation of an EVM block, right? So now, so theoretically, if an explorer supports DeFiChain exclusively, then the explorer can have an entire view of it, which is kind of the direction DeFiScan, MetaScan is all heading. However, now existing tools, let's say an Ethereum block explorer, can now connect directly to Ethereum RPC and then function exactly as it is. But then you will see a block number there, which is not an exact block number on the DFI blocks that you see. So, but VMMap is this RPC using which you can kind of get all these sort of across domain information. So you just provided a hash, it'll provide you with the other representation of it, and provide you the TX hash, provide you with the block number, provide the EVM block number, it'll give you the actual block number in the DVM land, and vice versa, all of that. Address map, so this is a new RPC, which basically will kind of provide representations in different formats for the wallet. Whichever keys that you have in your wallet. So let's say you have an old Bitcoin key, and then you want to figure out what is that on the meta layer, right? So on the EVM layer, what is that address So then you use address map, and then it's going to throw out all sorts of possible formats that the wallet supports. Um, then transfer domain. Transfer domain is one of the key ones. This is basically the one mechanism where you go across different islands, right? Which is EVM, DVM. So transfer domain is, again, it's an RPC on this side. So Light Wallet will also add support for VMMap. VMMap, I don't know. I don't think it really is required, but transfer domain is the key one. And then address maps, again, Light Wallet is going to have support where it's going to have support for EVM, all of that as well. All of that I heard from the teams that there's been incredible progress made, and everybody's going to be ready for that mainnet launch. Right. So yes, everything is going to be ready for mainnet. I don't think we'll have people will be left out. So happy to hear that. Cool. So those are the RPCs, and then transfer domain. Just sort of to explain how the very basics of it's going to work. Transfer domain currently is going to support EVM and EVM. Then there's UTXO support is going to come in later, but today UTXO, there are other mechanisms to convert between UTXO to DVM tokens. Eventually, transfer domain will take that over as well. This will be much later after mainnet in the coming months. But for now, DVM to EVM and EVM to DVM works, and how that works is the support's going to be just for DAT, which are the key tokens, not the custom tokens that users can create. Right, so the DAT tokens are the ones that goes through governance, right? So the DAT tokens, how they can be moved is basically just transfer domain, move it to EVM domain. That's pretty much all of it. But internally, what's going to happen is every time somebody moves a token from DVM to EVM, it reduces on the DAT side, and then it's going to show up on the EVM address. On the EVM address, it's going to be an ERC20 interface for it. And let's say a token has an ID 10 on the DVM side. On the Ethereum side, how it's going to look like is there's going to be a contract, which is going to be 0x, 0FF. So one of those, it's a node is going to have a namespace, and then followed by 10. So it's going to be a one-on-one corresponding contract. So that contract will be automatically deployed by the node whenever there is a token here. And using that contract address where it's an ERC20 interface that's going to be exposed. And so from EVM side, it's going to be exactly like how you operate in any other EVM land. And when you move it back, so it's going to reduce from that token, and it's going to go back as DAT tokens. So that should be transfer domain. Our team has worked hard to make it as seamless as possible.
Okay. Maybe one question from my side.
Yep.
That means the smart contract address is more or less hard coded in the node software, and only the node has access to it. Because
so what happens is currently the existing tokens are not migrated yet on testnet. But what will happen is on the network upgrade block, every existing token will end up being deployed as a contract.
Okay.
So the node will deploy a contract whenever a token gets created or during the migration for old tokens. So then it's just another transparent contract. That's the node just ends up creating it in the process. So, and as such, this is now reserved only for that token, and nobody else can use this.
Right. That's the key. Nobody else has access to it. Only the code.
Yep. Correct. Yes. So that is basically how this is going to work. And then, okay, so this is a slide that nobody will have to care about until they do. But it's just there in terms of, okay, so how does all of these, the on-chain governance attributes, for people who like to dig into the chain on-chain to see, what are all these things, how they are enabled and whatnot. So this kind of just basically the EVM, transfer domain, everything is now flagged. So these are kind of the things that in the last couple of weeks, team has been working on to get it production ready, basically. Because previously all these features were there, but it was not really in a stable point. So now we just sort of cleaned it up, and these are the features that will be exposed. Transfer domain, basically, the goal of transfer domain is not just to support just EVM, DVM, right? So it's going to be far more than that. So it's transfer domain can have what are the address that it can support for each of the different directions in which it can go. So all of that is going to be sort of, these are kind of the large high level flags. And then there's going to be new rule sets where what is the maximum size for DVM, maximum size for EVM, and then gas targets, gas limits, all of that. So just mentioning this here because this kind of gives a high level overview on, what are the exact specifics and how to kind of go and look at all of these specifics for developers who want to dig in. So that being said, talking about gas targets, gas limits.
Maybe one step back, a very personal question. So is there a parameter or something else I can use to track how many coins are transferred from the DVM to the EVM layer?
Excellent question. Yes. So that's also going to be in the governance attributes. There's another namespace in governance attributes, which is live namespace, live economy, which tracks all of it, which you might have noticed before. So that is going to have all of these as well. That's the other one that is going in by the end of this week. So once that tracking is also there, that is one of those final aspects before getting a production ready, right? So you want to be able to track what exactly is going on outside.
Yeah, I need this for my dashboard.
Yeah, I'm aware. Cool. So yes, that should be there for you to. I think you can start testing it next week. Next week on Changi or on testnet once it's ready, you should be able to take that for a spin. And so we'll also, from a node consensus point of view, that's also going to, all of those are going to be a part of the validation checks itself. So it's going to validate, hey, okay, whatever you move in is what comes out. And all of those kind of checks are there as well. So yes, that accounting is going to be a part of the same one. It's not mentioned here because I've not mentioned any of the live features. Live features for context for other people is basically, it is going to be an insight into what's actually going on in the node. So we just introduced it a while ago. It's not fully feature complete in the system, but slowly we're exposing more and more of the inner workings of the node through that so people can actually track what's going on. So the current loan minting mechanism, which is a loan token, which are tokens that can be used in a vault, all of that is basically information from there. You can go and look it up. So now talking about gas target and whatnot. So fees, the large structure of it, how it works is, so left side, what have it, so that's just a regular block. You have UTXO, DVM, EVM, all of these are part of the same block. The UTXO and DVM works exactly like it is today. All of these fees get aggregated, and then it goes to the miner as the UTXO fee. And then for EVM transactions, what happens is all of these, the EVM transaction follow EIP 1559. And in very much the same way, all of those get aggregated, and then the priority fees will be sent as tokens. Now, that token is going to be on the DVM land. So miners going to now get UTXO fee and a DVM token fee, right? So which is going to be the EIP 1559 priority fee. And according to EIP 1559, again, anything that's not a priority fee is going to be burnt. That pretty much straight away goes to the burn address. So this is just a large structure of how the fees are going to work. So a little bit of rash context on there is the way it's designed is every subsystem kind of takes ownership of how it does the fees, right? And then the overall validation is going to ensure that all domains, the accounting across all of them, where as it should be. That's the validation check, and then it'll kind of delegate to each and every domain to figure out what is the fee context for that particular domain. So that should be the rough idea about fees.
Okay. Maybe also here a question, can you give us a rough feeling about the burnt fee? How much is it? I'm pretty sure it's not the Ethereum fee. It should be lower on our EVM layer. But yeah, one transaction, what is the base fee I have to pay?
So I don't know if the testnet is the accurate, uh, right? So especially, I don't know that the Changi network is the accurate way to calculate it, because I think even in Changi network there were instances where people were sort of stress testing it,
Mm.
like filling up each blocks with like 250 to 300 transactions, where base fee is extremely high, right? Um, so but because it follows EIP 1559, you're going to have this, 12.5% up and down for the base fee. So it's going to depend on how mainnet, what applications are deployed,
Mm-hmm.
and how it's used. But in this context, I think it was a pretty important question. But what I can say is the EIP 1559 basically just sets, okay, 12.5 up, 12.5 down, right? And then it sets the base target, and like to Ethereum land 30 million, and then 15 million for the target, and 30 million as the limit. And all of these are sort of hard coded in there. But in DeFiChain land, we already have a governance mechanism through which we can tweak these,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so all of these, what the percent of that is to go up, come down, what the gas target is, all of these again are going to be those attributes that we talked about. This is not going to be in the mainnet version, the first launch of mainnet, because I don't think we've gotten all of that yet. There already gas target is there, the the gas limit is there. All of that are already part of it. I actually think it just got in this week. Um, so all of those are already part of it, and I think next week people can tweak that, test it out as well. However, all of the other, what is that percent that you can sort of move up and down? All of those are going to be tweaks as well. So based on the governance, these are things that we can dynamically change if the
Mm-hmm.
community votes for it. So yeah, that's something that it's things can move. It is
Okay.
a knob that the community
Mm.
can decide. Okay, if at all things are getting completely filled up, then you can change those parameters to allow more room for it. But that being said, this shouldn't affect the DFI side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those sites should still be functional exactly the same way.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Here, a
so
question.
somebody deploying, I don't know, some kind of a game to in Ethereum land will not end up, you know, will not end up affecting. Some of the fees can affect in a certain way, but it's not going to have a big impact on the
Mhm.
DVM land, or if you're dealing with a vault and whatnot.
Yeah. Great. There is a question related to this from Figo. He said, however, default fee is really, really low. Have you ever thought about to increase default fee from 1 PO minus 5, 10 PO minus 5 DFI per V byte? So it
Right.
looks like
So
it's very low.
yeah, and particularly on testnet as well, right? So I do not know if testnet is a good gauge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so EVM fee currently follows the exact, so EVM, the fee is scaled based on the operations that you perform,
Mm-hmm.
right? So all the opcodes that you end up using in EVM, and that scaling is now exactly set as Ethereum scaling. So what we internally use is we use a VM called Sputnik VM, for people who are aware of it, and then Sputnik has the exact same scaling mechanism. And we picked Sputnik because we want something that's been battle tested, that's been used
Mm-hmm.
in production quite heavily, and so that follows the exact one, and that's what we use. So it is going to scale up based on those applications. But in terms of overall, is the block filling up? I think it'll be personally, I think it will be good to just let us see how those behavior actually is, and where the base fee sort of settles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In mainnet, it's not going to be the same thing as testnet. So, and based on that, that's one of the reasons we made sure that we, at the very least, got the gas target and
Mm-hmm.
the gas limit in there. So those are things that can be, if we see that, okay, things are too low, or I mean too low right now. It's gonna, if it's too high, means there's too many
Yeah.
people that are using it, right? too low means there's not sufficient use, then probably, you know what, there's going to be more. We don't actually have to care about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's gonna be interesting to see where it comes in, and then but we have these knobs to ensure that, you know, we get it to a place
Mm-hmm.
which the community feels is the right one to be.
Great. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, so that's the basics of the fee part. And then, so next few weeks, what's going to be happening is, so there's been a lot of, security hardening that's been going on in the last couple of weeks. And we're just wrapping up all of that and then making sure that we cover everything in tests. All of that is there. And then, you know, for the community as well, somebody wants to dig in, tests are always a good way to sort of, get in and then make sure that we add more. There can never be enough tests. So please feel free to contribute if you're a developer, and that would greatly help the team. And then DST20 migrations that I just talked about. So what we don't have on testnet right now is the current existing tokens are not migrated over. So if you create a new token, you can then use transfer domain to move that across. But existing tokens, that early migration phase, that is being finalized now. It should get in this week. I maybe today or maybe tomorrow, something like that. These are just like, it should be fairly straightforward, small ones, but it's just things on the to-do list, you know, that came way down low in priority among everything else. So that should be done, and then there's quite a lot of refactors and cleanups that's been going on, and this is going to be something, you know, that goes on. Once we set the consensus, it's going to go on again for another week or so. This mostly that's going to be focused more on the stability of the node, and then some of the random crashes. All of that should get resolved by then. And then storage and data improvements. That is something that's going to continue on even after we set mainnet release. So for now, it's the focus has been just getting all the features that's needed. Then team's going to start on performance and, you know, how we're dealing with data, all of these things. We've had a rough idea on how it's all going to go, and we've planned it out. But we've planned it out in a manner where we just get the very very base elements out in a stable way. And then, so what that means is, for instance, good chunk of the EVM data is going to be sitting on the working memory set. Not all of it, but there's going to be a good chunk of it that's going to be sitting in. Towards the next week, we're going to be cutting down on that, and then making sure, you know, slowly all of that kind of goes away. So there are things like these that is going to be a work in progress for the next 1 to 2 months, right? But these are things that nobody has to worry about. But it's going to be something and more and more of these go on, the overall performance of the node is going to improve. From a stability point of view, we like absolutely by next week everything is going to be stable, but the node might be a little bit slower than you expect. And then performance improvements we haven't even gotten on the optimization phase yet. So we'll be working on that after we set the mainnet stable. Already, I think between the last version and the next version, there should be at least about 30% performance bump. So that should happen in the early next week. But beyond that, there's going to be a lot more that's going to go on, because the way that we planned it is currently every transaction. So in Bitcoin UTXO land, everything is serial, one by one. And there are ways to improve on that, but because we've utilized early Bitcoin code, it's very, very hard to get there. But this is the DVM transactions. But on the EVM side, currently the testnet reference implementation is again going to go through exactly in the same way. But the way we've planned it is, even internally, everything is what we internally, it's called as transaction queues on the EVM side, and they can all be independent to each other. So eventually we can start parallelizing everything on the EVM side. So the way that we sort of think it will happen is, even before the regular DVM side is done, EVM side is actually going to be done parallelly. Right now, it'll be like 2x the time, but then eventually it might even be lesser. The EVM overhead is actually going to be lesser than what it is. But those are things that we haven't even started the work on that yet. It is going to be a while, but those are some of the things that will slowly get picked up. So um, the reason I'm hopefully this just gives a larger idea on where all of this is. So if you pick it up and then the node is a little bit slower, there's no reason to panic about it. It is something because today it's just doing a lot more, right? Before that, it wasn't doing as many things. Now it has the whole of EVM, so it's doing a lot more. But the overall roadmap is all of this pretty much becomes invisible to the point that performance of that won't even be noticed. So that's kind of just a rough story on what to expect. And then more Ethereum tooling RPCs. So there's going to be quite a few RPCs that the team had not prioritized, which was a little bit intensive in terms of the amount of work that needed to be done. So we prioritized the consensus parts so far. And all of that is also going to be picked up over the next coming weeks. And the last 3 to 4 are not going to be blockers for mainnet. There's a little bit of the third part that will be, but then beyond that it won't be, and everything else is going to just continue along, and then we'll have further releases that optimizes things and whatnot. Yeah, so that's kind of the next few weeks, and yes, it's a short one today, but hopefully gives a good idea, and yes, it's going to be now time to build for not just the early developers, I think for everybody starting from next week. So yes, we're pretty excited about that. Yep. So that should be it. Any can take questions or anything
Yeah,
else.
there
Yeah.
are one or other question. Thanks a lot for the insights. I have learned. Okay, now he lost the connection. Maybe he's joining again. Yes. Here you are again.
Hi. Yes, I dropped off for. I think there was a network
Great.
issue. Sorry
Thanks
about that.
for the insights. It helped. I learned something, and yeah, for the normal users out there, it looks like now the next 3 to 4 weeks, everything is happening towards mainnet launch. You're talking about, or you talked about the latest beta versions coming now this week. Then everything should be tested. You're moving to the testnet 3 then to test again, and in parallel the node software is available and mainnet launch can happen. So just a couple of days and weeks left, having a really solid running EVM layer, hopefully, fingers crossed, on our mainnet. Great work, thanks.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so much, TC. It's been. I. I would sort of. I think I'll be curious to. I think that answer, community can answer on how the VM has been. The node experience might have been flaky because it is early, so it's like okay, now something crashes, now something. So all of that, it's. I really just want to say thanks to everybody who's been working through quite a lot actually. Like it was pretty intensive couple of weeks,
Yeah.
right? And for external community to follow everything that the core devs were on, it's really super energetic, and it's really amazing to see.
Great. There were one or other questions in the chat I want to put in here. Here's one from the Shitty Explorer channel. Lastly, I've heard in DeFi Twitter space that Berkeley Research is very cautious and aware about topics like exploits, etc. But I didn't find any information about third-party or internal audits by Daniel, I think Dr. Daniel Kagara. So,
By Dan, okay, it looks like internal audits by Daniel Kagara. We'll have to talk to Daniel Kagara. uh, but yeah, I think there were a few that DeFiChain went through before. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be. It's really, I think community has been the best at source of that, and looking through the code and figuring out how it actually happens. And yes, Daniel Kagara has been he's been an amazing contributor to the DeFi community. And yes, I would like to think nothing from him is a good sign. uh, but hopefully somewhere in there, Daniel Kagara is working hard to figure out something. But yes, I think like we are fairly confident. The entire team is quite confident that
Yeah,
they've kind of, and again, community as well, right? So this is the reason that we've been getting everything out early, so the community can really follow what's happening, poke holes, do these stress tests,
correct.
move all of these to see, because at the end of the day, it's a decentralized project, right? So, and the beautiful advantage of that is like, okay, everybody can see, everybody can push the limits, throw things at it that's not expected,
Yeah.
right? And which has been happening on on Changi network, and that was the intent, and the community has been doing exactly that, and which is why so far I think it's been fantastic to see that.
And maybe comment from my side what I learned in the past. The only bridge or way between the DVM and the EVM layer is the transfer domain. So it's a very limited interconnection between the two layers. And here everyone can try out their best to find a bottleneck or something wrong there. I'm pretty sure you did your best. It's more or less one command transferring the tokens. And it's not too complex to ensure that our base layer remains as it is, and the EVM layer is more or less a separate blockchain on top of ours.
Yep. Yes, and also I would sort of say because it is this one layer, it's also easy from a code point of view to jump in and then track that, and then if you are somebody who likes to dig around past things that it's not expected, it'd be amazing that for you to actually do that and also contribute back. If you write those tests or fuzzers or whatnot, it'd also be like, we can also add it into the repo just
Yeah.
to see, okay, these are things that's been done. But yes, for a community, my request would be, because that is that one bridge, just go in, try and abuse it as much as you can, right? I'm glad that people have tried to do that on testnet, and we do see now and then, there's
Yeah.
especially I think my DeFiChain folks have been fantastic, and they've been trying to do quite a lot of stress tests, and so I think these sort of things are like, that's what has to be done during these times, right? And this has been done well, but this, there is always another person to look at, which is pretty good, right? More people have looked at it, more people gain that confidence, the better, right? So
Great. Another question. You showed the slide with the interconnection to Bitcoin and the Ethereum blockchain. Is there any update for the atomic swap? Are you planning to implement it again after MetaChain is launched?
yes, absolutely. I think it's already live on testnet, but on mainnet. So currently, the attributes that we were talking about, we just got it in there, in that just cleaning it up and then getting it in there. That's also part of this release, but we've not put it through very specific set of testing. So, and I don't think the core team folks that I know have also not looked deeply enough into it, even though it's already live on testnet. So we just want to do it's just another sanity
Yeah.
review, another fresh look at it, make sure that we've covered all before enabling it on mainnet. So once that's done, we would expect that it's enabled a little bit later. I think I would be optimistic that probably in the next once meta layer is there, once EVM is there, probably in the next couple of, latest in a quarter, right?
We
Right.
will
So
see.
yeah, I would like to think that it's enabled then. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Then a longer question. I think essential for many applications is a smaller block time, for example, 10 seconds, without the large deviations which we currently have. Some block need 10 minutes, although the mean value is 30 seconds. Do you have any plans to implement a more stable and smaller block time, especially in the context of EVM?
Right. That's a great question. So one is there are two parts to this question, right? So one is more stable. What that stable is going to be when you look at the time horizon of things, right? So it
Mm.
is stable when you look at it as a day, but then the shorter the time frame where you have these spikes, and getting it to a more stable point, I think, has become more challenging with the current consensus. But one of the things we can do is reduce that overall block time, and for that we did run some early experiments, and we are definitely targeting something half of what we have. I, uh, I, from what we've seen so far, for what we've observed so far, we are pretty optimistic that we can get it there. But we didn't run as many tests as we would have liked,
Mhm.
because we want to test it on a. Because currently we have about 15,000 masternodes, right? So we want to sort of test it on that scale a little bit to understand, okay, what the implications of that are. How does the system react to all of these pieces? So that I expect that that's going to be one of the other larger ones we do once the meta is launched, once it's stable,
Mhm.
right? So I do think there is a open PR by Peter, who's one of the key core
Mhm.
contributors. Well, I I'm not sure it's up to date yet with the current changes. Um, but with entire EVM, I don't think it has been brought back up to date. But this was pre-EVM, just that block time improvements.
Mhm.
So there is a branch where people can, if you're curious, you can just go take it up and then test it how it works. But I think we will get it to a point as well. Like that is something that I know that some of the core team is keen to work on after
Mhm.
we are done with this.
Great, thanks. Then a different question. Is the gas price relevant at all if the DeFi chain block is time sorted?
It actually is not. So the way the sorting works is on the DVM side, the UTXO and DVM, that will be time sorted. Entry time is currently how it's followed, and then you have this randomization as well, that if enabled we can have, and then every EVM transaction is straight up passed in to the EVM machinery, each of those queues. And by default, there is a certain element of time, but then you can actually use fees to bring your transaction up on
Mhm.
just for EVM transactions. And so it's sort of the mix of both.
Mhm.
Because in Ethereum land, yes, you can replace it by putting a higher fee, because otherwise your previous transactions are going to be stuck, right? So we follow the exact same mechanism, and and because EVM now scales with a completely different fee mechanism, which is very similar to the Ethereum land. So because of that, we also sort it in an exactly similar way. So this again, miner can pick different things on the EVM side, and on EVM side, everything that applies to Ethereum applications, EVM applications applies here as well. So
Mhm.
there could be interesting avenues of MEV. There could be interesting avenues of, depending on the application. It's going to be on the application to make sure, front running and all of these kind of things are things that they take care of. So it is existing knowledge from Ethereum to port over and then utilize on these states.
Great. Then Honsan, what about cross-chain with Bitcoin roadmap? It is a priority after mainnet launch? Question mark. I hope yes, cause it's gonna be the game changer.
Yep, that's absolutely right. That is one of the key priorities going forward for the next year. But right now we are focusing
Mhm.
on getting this out, and then after that, while part of the core team members are going to be working on some of these other things that we just talked about, that's going to go on for a good bit. But there is also part of us going to be pretty much jumping straight onto that,
Mhm.
getting the early prototypes for it done. But yeah, it's in a little bit of an early stage, so
Okay.
we'll share more updates as we go there. Yeah.
Interesting question. Are you using AI in any form to help with coding the MetaChain?
uh, I don't. I think you will get a different answer from each person. Uh, so I mean, it also depends on what is AI, right? So Uh, I, it's maybe the answer is both yes and no.
Mm. Okay. Christian Pedersen, it's possible to integrate Lightning in further time with the UTXO model or something like that.
Okay. Wow. All right. So that's again another really good question. So another thing that's on the roadmap is we also want to we're looking at merging upstream in some form. What I mean by that is pull all the updates from Bitcoin
Hmm.
that has been happening in the recent past, which includes Taproot, Schnorr signatures and whatnot. Uh, so, but there are like quite a lot of meaty things that's there for the next 6 months. So I don't have a clear timeline on how all of these are going to go, but yes, that is definitely in the cards.
Hmm.
Particularly Taproot support is something that we are going to be looking at for sure, which is going to help with all of the Lightning aspects as well, right? So yeah, once we have that, I think it's going to be a lot easier to think about all of these things that's there on Bitcoin Line, be it entire Lightning Network support, or be it other interesting protocols that's coming up, ordinals, or anything on those lines. Some of them we can support today itself, but then some of them only make sense
Hmm.
after Taproot. Otherwise, not ideal. So our first focus is going to be on, okay, how can we figure out the strategy with Bitcoin, because we've now deviated so much,
Hmm.
and we've also had a lot more complex problem set. For instance, looking at one of the key challenges that we faced, which was which increasingly made things undeterministic, was uh, Bitcoin has a very old tool chain and a very old build system. And but then now with our code base, where we have multiple languages to support, uh, merging the two, utilizing some of that system, it created a lot of variables. So the team has been working hard to figure that out, and then figure out in a manner. Now all of it again.
Hmm.
It's just just a single make, from the toolchain point of view. It's exactly the same process, but under the hood, it manages all those complexities, and then it produces a binary, which in fact is actually smaller than what it's supposed to. It was
Hmm.
before. Um, yeah, so I think that'll be like a interesting tidbit. So now we have EVM and a whole chunk of things,
Hmm.
but the mainnet, the final 4.0 binary that you'll expect in the end, will actually be smaller than what it used to be before. So there's been a lot of these kind of challenges that the team has been working towards. So perhaps there's also ways in which we can contribute back to Bitcoin in some way,
Hmm.
but not everything will fit into the Bitcoin world, because Bitcoin has very different goals, in the sense, the block time is
Yeah.
10 minutes approximately, which means they have very, very different priorities. What makes sense here might not make sense there, but there are still things which we can possibly, work together there. So those are, but in order for us to achieve that, we want to first figure out what is the way in which we are able to easily both pull and have this largely just enable us mindshare with
Hmm.
Bitcoin, right? So that is a priority. Once we figure out how that's going to work, and once we get that technical story streamlined on how that's going to work, whether be it we do a complete pull from Bitcoin and then change our code to be a lot more modular enough that we can sort of create this, pull this VM land as a library out, or it may mean that we completely deviate in the code base, and we decide not to have that, the current, the code base compatibility,
Hmm.
and kind of go in a different way. So these are things I think both has its pros and cons. So the teams
Yeah.
are working on it a little bit. Once we have clarity on that, then the immediate next step is to, but one way or the other we'll get that, but it's just a matter of which
Hmm.
decision that'll help us in the long run, because we don't want to go through the same indeterministic parts where some of these ancient tools break, and it
Yeah.
makes it difficult, right? So
Okay.
which way do we solve it is the one that we are figuring out the pros and cons.
Yeah.
Once that's done, we are going to be pulling back from upstream on all of the more relevant changes, whichever way it goes. Either we build it or we pull from Bitcoin, one of those two, right? So, and then we can talk about all of these.
Great,
So, but
thanks.
I'm fairly optimistic it'll happen this year. By this year, we should have. Uh, I, I'd like to think we can actually accomplish it, not just map it out by this year. But if you're somebody who's sort of worked on it, or you work on a lot in Bitcoin, take a look at our code base. Please get involved. It'll be an exciting journey. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe last question here in the chat. My DeFi chain, will the DeFi MetaChain RPC combined with Ocean or will it be separate?
Right now, all of the EVM, I assume that, yes, by DMC, you mean the EVM RPCs. Yeah, I think they will be separate. I do not think it'll be a part of the Ocean set itself, because what Ocean RPCs was backed by Jellyfish. It was to provide a coherent interface into the DeFi chain and the DVM and the Bitcoin land together. Right, so that's what those RPCs were meant to be. So that's going to be the direction that it still continues. We'll have some mechanism to expose this, but I do not know Ocean itself will provide it. Right, so it may be it's provided as a completely separate URL. Right, it may not be just straight up Ocean. I think the teams are working on that to figure out what the best strategy is. But yeah, I personally am not. I've not currently. I don't have the 100% confidence to say which direction it's going to be. Yeah, but once that's in place, yeah, we'll add an update on that as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Prasanna. That was the last question. A lot of people are looking forward to MetaChain. If you follow the chat later on, Turkish community is mega hyped. Everyone is looking forward. Thanks for giving us the insights. I think that helped a lot for the people out there. What you are doing, what is planned, what is coming next. Yeah, August is the month of MetaChain, looks like so.
Yes.
We see the goal coming to us, and yeah, thanks for this tech talk, talking to the people out there, to me, answering all the questions. Really appreciate it. And yeah, then see you soon here. Next Tech Talk. We're looking forward to it. No clue about the topic then. What is after MetaChain? So you gave some outlook, but who knows what's coming next? Then we will see.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot. So there'll be a lot to talk about. So we'll figure out at that point which particular part we want to take up and talk. But thank you so much, DZ. Appreciate it. I appreciate you making the time to make sure that everybody has these insights.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining the live sessions, and for sure everyone not watching it live, it's worth to have a look here on the Tech Talk. See you soon on the channel with this format or any other one. Have a great time. Bye bye.